to another video on how to model and design with QuickStructure 10. Today we'll be looking at how you can import drawing or models from AutoCAD DXF into the software. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the models we have in AutoCAD. So we'll start with this arrangement, which is quite that consists of just rectangles. Okay. When you import model from AutoCAD, there are many ways you can do it, but I will start with a simpler one, where you have just a plain rectangles. In fact, I will actually advise is always better to just start with a plain rectangle, even if the drawing is complicated or however it is. You can always, take out every other thing, but you are just left with the rectangles. Okay, what I mean by that is this. Let's assume, for instance, that let's say probably you have a drawing, that looks like this. You can see you have quite a lot of stuff, loaded in it. You have the ground floor and every other thing, so many things, the grid and all the rest. And of course the rectangles also. It's always better just take away every other thing. You don't need every other line. All you don't need a text even. You don't need any other thing. All you need to work with the software is only just the rectangles. Okay. You can also choose to import your drawing as it is. I will show you that later. You can choose to import your drawing as it is, but the point is this. If you import it as it is, you will be battling with quite so many lines everywhere. There will be a lot of objects that you have to deal with. So it's always better to keep it simple. Just keep it simple. Just reduce everything down to just a simple rectangle or polygon. The software work with both rectangle and polygon. Okay. Yeah. So always just strip it, remove every other lines and all the rest. So that you are left with just the rectangle that comprises the rectangle that comprises the panel arrangement. Okay, so it's quite very important. And again, you need to make sure in AutoCAD, make sure that all the rectangles are connected. I don't know how you can achieve that, but it's very, very important. Make sure they are all connected. Okay, and that's why sometimes because even if you have like, let's say we zoom in, even if you have like 5mm gap between the panels, the software will treat it as if it is an expansion joint, because in the software there is room for expansion joint. You can, a very example, I can decide to have an expansion joint at this point, at this line. Okay, that means that this is off by, I think expansion by the distance of expansion joint. We have talked about expansion joint in previous videos, so it might worth you going back to look at that when we're talking about general modeling with the software. So it's always very important. Make sure that the lines are all connected. The rectangles are all connected. If you have any gap, the software, even if it's 5mm gap, the trouble with AutoCAD is that if you have 5mm gap, you might need to zoom and zoom and zoom for it to happen, for you to see it. But in any case, just make sure you prevent that from happening. That is one of the reasons why also, to a large extent, we kind of advise people modeling direct with our software. It doesn't matter. You can, but let me not go ahead of myself. There are many ways you can mitigate other things that you can do. Generally, we advise people to model within our software. Okay. In fact, you can actually, what I was trying to say, which I didn't end up saying, is the fact that actually you can even import your model into the software, and then looking at the model, you now create the model with the software. I'll tell you what I mean by that. Okay, let's not go ahead of ourselves. But it's always better. Just keep it simple. You don't need all the lines, to be honest. But if you need to import it with the lines, you can, but I will show you the reason why it's not really that necessary at the end, because it will just, there'll be a lot of lines to play with, okay? Sometimes if you want to have it with the grid lines, let's assume, for instance, that you want the grid lines to, let me just use this as an example. Let's assuming that you want the rectangles and the grid lines. You can also do that, because again, the grid lines are more or less at the intersection of the rectangles, so it's okay. But again, if you have so many lines, like here, looking at this beam line and all the rest, of course, again, I'm just using a little bit simpler architect, floor modeling. In this case, I know when you get a drawing in AutoCAD from an architect, sometimes it's quite very complicated, and there's quite a lot of lines everywhere. That's one of the reasons why to prepare it for use within the software, it's always better just strip everything off, and bring things down just only to the rectangles or the polygons that you need. Let me just repeat what I said before. When you have your rectangles, please always make sure that all that it's joined very well, that there is no single gap between them. Okay, just make sure that it is joined very well. If you have, even if it's a 1 millimeter gap, 1 millimeter, which is so tiny, the soft, or even 5 millimeter gap, the software will see it as an expansion joint. So always make sure that it is well closed and they join each other quite very well. So once you have sorted out all the lines and all the rest, and you are now down to this, okay, you can now save the rectangle in AutoCAD as a DXF, or whatever CAD software that you are using. Okay, so just save it as a DXF. So of course, you just click on File and then click Save, and save as a DXF. I've already saved this before, so I don't need to save it again. But you just save it as a DXF. Like, of course, like click on File, and if you click on Save, and then you can save as a DXF. So when you save it as it has to be a DXF format, not the DWG format. No, the software does not work with DWG. It just works only with DXF. So you have to save as a DXF. Once you save as a DXF, you can now go to the software and then import it. Okay, or you bring it into the software. So now we have our file as a DXF. I will just go over to the software, just bring a new stuff, and then you can now bring it into the software. And then when you want to bring it in, I will advise, make sure it is solid rectangles. Okay, you can choose the color you want to use. You can actually choose your color. It doesn't matter. Software will work with whatever color you play with. Let's assume we choose this color. Okay, just make sure that it is not that it is solid. So because if you click on this, it will be not solid, but no fill, but we want it to be solid. Okay, so that's it. And then the next thing you do, of course, is to import the drawing. So you click on File, and then you can click on Import. So we have two method of it. So you have both import and insert. But I will use import this time around. Okay, import as DXF. So I will just go to where I saved the file. Okay, it's supposed to be somewhere here. So that is this, and then I think it should be this one. Okay, then I'll click open. So you can see it have imported the file, the DXF that we have, which is exactly like this. As you can see, this is the DXF, and this is what is imported into the software. Okay, so once you have this, the rest is just the way we have always done it before. The rest of the modeling is just the same. In fact, modeling in AutoCAD and importing into the software is almost like modeling with shapes, which we have done a lot before on. Okay. You can also import direct and form a floor direct. Okay. But I will advise against it. It's better to, first of all, bring the model into the software. Just bring it in. Just click on File and click on Import. Okay. If you want to insert the model, you can insert it. You can click on Insert, for instance. I'll select the model again, which is, that should be 5.1, sorry. And then you click Open, and then just move the mouse and insert it. And in fact, you can actually insert this over and over again, for instance, assuming if you have you want to create different kind of floors. So yeah, you can do that. I can just put this, you can do it over and over again. So the thing is, and then at the end, just click and cancel. Yeah. So I will advise this method. So bring in the floors. Okay. If you have, you can bring all of them in, to be honest. You can, okay, let me just save this as DSF just to give you an example. I'll say export as DSF. Now I have all of them. Let's say I call this 5. Okay. So click save. Okay. So the thing is, I could if I then it like if I go back and import it, let's say insert. Okay. It will insert all of them as a DSF. So this is 5. Okay. So you can see, you can actually have all the arrangement. You can have all the arrangement, you know, the ground floor, the first floor, the second floor, the roof level. You can have all of them arranged properly in AutoCAD DXF on AutoCAD, and then you import it as a DSF into the software. So you import, and that's it. Okay. And then you can cancel. So the whole point is this. So it's better import the drawing as a DSF into the software. And then when you have imported that, then everything is fine. Then you can now add. In fact, the next stage is just like what we have done in modeling with shape, which we did a very, very well detailed tutorial on. Okay. So because again, once you are at this stage, it's just like modeling with shape. Modeling with shape is you have created you created the rectangle as plain rectangles, and then you add them as floor elements or structural elements. Okay, you use them to create your floor elements. Okay, the beams, the panels, the beams, and the columns. So that is just what modeling with shape is all about. We have also looked at modeling with element. Modeling with element is similar to what we used to do with version 9. Because you start adding the panels. So you are adding the structural elements direct. So usually like in version 9 and what we have also shown in version 10 is that with rectangular panels, you can also create the rectangular panels. And by the time you are done, the software can now create the beams and the columns and all the rest. That is just anyway, I have done a very detailed video on modeling with elements and modeling with shape. But AutoCAD import or AutoCAD DXF import is just similar to modeling with shapes, because when you import from AutoCAD, what you have is only the plain rectangles. That is what the software is going to deal with. It doesn't understand, even if you like create the beams and the columns. It doesn't really, bother about all those things. Okay, it's not necessary. The thing is that it's going to create them. At the end of the day, by the time you finish creating the beams and the column, then if you need to edit, you can edit. So don't really need to bother yourself trying to, create the beams and the column. No, you don't need to do that. You don't do that within the in AutoCAD. Don't waste your time doing it. Okay, because by the time you import it, the software will just see it as a line and rectangles, and that's all. That's where it ends. So they're just plain lines and rectangles. Okay. So the best thing is just have only your rectangular panels, which are rectangular objects in AutoCAD. And by the time you import it into the software, And then you can now add it as floors within the software. Let me repeat. From this point onward, everything I'm going to do is exactly what we have done when we were doing our general modeling, which is all based on modeling with shapes. Modeling with shapes, let me repeat again, is all about you create your basic rectangles and then you add it as a structural floor. And there's a lot of advantage in doing that. I've also shown in a different video, let me repeat, how you can model with elements. And I've also shown in the previous videos how you can actually start off modeling with shapes, and then you now go on to now switch over to modeling with elements. You can do all that. Okay, so let's now move forward. The next thing, we now have to add this as floors. Before I do that, let me just delete off this. I don't need it. The floors I need are there. So we have these 5 floors, and if the floors are the same, again, all you need is just only the first arrangement, okay? Because from there you can create the rest. Okay, so now I need to do is to add my floors. So first of all, I select this, assuming this is my first that's the ground floor. So you click on modeling with shapes, okay? Modeling with shapes, and then you click on add new floor with selected shapes. Okay, so we're now adding a new rectangular floor. So click, then I'll add. As you can see, my ground floor is added. Now I'll go again and select this, and then I will add it as the upper floor. That's my first floor. Okay, click. You can see the first floor is added. Then go on this again, and then add this as my second floor. Okay, and as I said, if the arrangement is all the same, all you need is just only one of these, because with that you can just keep adding over and over. But the reason why I'm selecting them separate is just to show, assuming if the arrangement is different. Okay, now let's assume that this one is our roof arrangement. So you click on this and you click on add new roof beam level, and that's it. Here we are. We have our arrangement, and everything is just like we have done it before. Actually, modeling with shapes is just like, in fact, and one of the reasons why we created modeling with shapes, because people of course always ask, oh yeah, you can always import your drawing from AutoCAD, but we realized that, why don't you do the same direct in the software. You can also create those objects, create those rectangles with the software direct, and then you can now add them as a floor. It's almost the same, to be honest, because when you model in AutoCAD, as I've said before at the beginning, here you have just plain rectangular objects. It's just only objects. They're not structural elements. They're just plain rectangular shapes. And that's exactly what happens with modeling with shapes, because at the beginning, when you are bringing out the rectangles, they are just only but plain rectangular shapes. And by the time you have finished bringing them out, and you can even save them on a different project, and then you can now start adding them as a floor. Okay, yeah, so that's it with the model. So as you can see, the model is done. At this point, I can now edit. Now I have added all the floors. I can now edit some other things I want to edit. Assuming if, let's assume that one of these is, let's assume that this is a staircase void, for instance. Okay, you can select this and then change it to staircase void. Assuming if it is, you can, or sometimes I tend to use do not detail. Okay, do not detail means that, pardon me, do not detail means that it will still load the panel as usual, but it will not detail it. Sometimes some people prefer that when it comes to staircase. They just want the load to happen somehow, although it's not really an accurate assessment of the load that's coming from the staircase, but at least somehow they have load going all the way to the foundation. But that happens, and at the end of the day, the software does not detail that panel. Okay, so I will use that, and then that's it. So you have your staircase. assuming if that is the staircase, although it's a very big one for that matter anyway, but again, I'm just making an assumption, just follow me. So here again, I can also say do not detail. So, and that's it. And yeah, the model is done. I can just go ahead and click on design. Then I always use design settings, automatic design settings, because I just want to select what I want and leave out what I don't want. Okay, and then the next thing is to run the design. Click start automatic design and click on yes, and then the design is done. So as you can see, that is our design. I can actually remove the grid so I can see. So that's it. So we have our design done. That is how you model. You bring your model from AutoCAD into the software. It's quite, you can see here, this panel was not detailed. Okay, assuming that's our staircase. Okay, so that's how you actually bring your model into the from AutoCAD into the software. And this again is probably the method we advise, whereby you actually bring in the shapes, the rectangular shapes, first into the software, and then you add it as a floor. Okay, and again, as I said, once you have brought this into this level where you have the rectangles, then the job is done. It's just as what we have learned all the while, which is modeling with shapes, because at this point you have your rectangular shapes, and then the next thing is to add them as floors. Okay, let me also repeat, as I said before, when you model from AutoCAD, it's similar to modeling with shape. Okay, and I also advise, I've said this before, just make sure that the rectangles are all well closed up. There's no single gap between them. If you have, even if it's 5mm gap between them, then the software will see it as an expansion joint, and that will create a problem. Just make sure there's no single gap. Okay, and then another thing again I also say is this: sometimes, most often, I will confess, it's actually faster to model direct with the software. It's kind of much more faster, except if you are very, very good with AutoCAD and you have done a very good job in making sure that there's no single lap, there's no single gap between the panels. Another thing you have to also watch out again in AutoCAD, also make sure the panels are not on top of each other. That could also happen. Where the panels are on top of each other. So just make sure they are not on top of each other, because if they're on top of each other, that becomes a problem, because again, you cannot have panels on top of each other, it doesn't work. So just make sure these are the things that you have to watch out if you are to model from AutoCAD. And because of all those little errors, we kind of like always advise just model direct with the software. In fact, you can even import the drawing in, and then you can import the drawing and then you can model. We'll see how you can do that in the next lesson. You can import the model into the software, and when you import it in, and then you can actually model direct. I'll show you how to do that also. Okay, now the final thing I will also say is this. Apart from bringing the model from AutoCAD as a DXF, as we have just done, you can actually import and add direct. I'll show that in the next lesson. And what I mean by that is that you can actually import the floor direct from DXF, and it will be added at the same time. I kind of advise against doing that, because if you import direct and you add at the same time, now if something is wrong, you might not know, you might not actually know. So that's why I kind of like we But again, sometimes too, it might also be a good idea. But again, it depends on whichever one that works for you. Because the thing is, when you import direct, okay, um, if there is a discrepancy in the model, the software automatically will flag. I mean, you will see double grid. I will show you what that means in the next lesson. Okay, yeah. But for now, that is practically it. How you can import um, your model from AutoCAD DXF into the software, and you just work with it. And it's quite very simple, to be honest. And as I've said at the beginning, it's just like when you are modeling with shapes. And because in the software, when you model with shapes, you basically create the rectangles and then you now add them as a floor. In modeling with AutoCAD, in AutoCAD, and then same as a DXF, you are also modeling with shapes, with rectangular shapes or polygonal shapes. And then by the time you import it into the software, it will be imported as plain shapes. And once you get to that point, it's just like modeling with shape. Inside the software, you can just use all the methods and all the tricks we have been using to get our model built within that stage. Okay, I hope you find this very useful. Let me know in the comment. Thank you very much. Bye.